Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime as Liverpool return to Premier League action with their third match of the league campaign on Monday night at Anfield against Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. In a game that has taken on a very different significance to what it had in previous years. I think certainly over the last 5 years or so, you always looked at that home game against Arsenal and thought out of all the home and away big fixtures against the big six, that was the one that you could pretty much guarantee that Liverpool were going to come away with all 3 points and normally guarantee that it was going to be a fairly enjoyable game as well. Arsenal certainly seemed to have this soft underbelly that was always perfectly exploited by the way Liverpool play and the players we had on offer. You know, the front three seem to love playing against them every time. We seem to have had multiple games where all three of them, Mane, Salah and Firmino, have managed to bag goals. It's tended to end at least a win to Liverpool by 3 goals. But now, of course, we know it's a totally different story. We've played Arsenal a couple of times since Mikel Arteta came in, and we've seen plenty of them in these kind of big matches, and they are an utterly different prospect. He has got them playing in a way that has added grit, that has added desire as well. They seem to come into these kind of games not looking like they're going to get beat from minute one. They come into these games looking like they're going to really cause you problems, both on the counter and defensively as well, and they certainly don't look like they're ever going to be completely out of it in the way that Arsenal have been in the past. I certainly don't think, regardless of what the result's going to be, whether we win, lose or draw, I don't think it's going to be another one of those where we're 3 goals up with 10 minutes to go or anything like that, and we feel like we can rest on our laurels and just bask in the fact that Liverpool delivered an absolute masterclass. I think from minute 1 to minute 90, this is going to be a very, very tough game, and we're going to have to see the best that Liverpool Football Club has got to offer. And thankfully, after the game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge last weekend, it feels like we're getting back to that. Alisson Becker, and we'll have more on him later on in the video, said after that game that he felt like Liverpool were back on the right track, given that ever since we had the pandemic and we came back after lockdown and we had those restart matches at the end of last season and a couple of matches at the start of this season as well, it's felt like Liverpool haven't quite achieved the level that we were maybe reaching about 12 months ago, where we literally just we won every single game week in, week out. And if we want to win the Premier League, I know Man City have dropped points today, which is absolutely fantastic, losing 5-2 to Leicester. But if we want to open up a lead on them and all the other teams as well, you know, it's anyone's game at the moment. Even teams like Everton have still got maximum points so far. But if we want to put distance between us and the chasing pack, we've got to get back to that form of winning week in, week out. And I think given the situation with Arsenal at the moment and the way they play and the way they approach these matches against big sides away from home, I think getting a win today would set us in very, very good stead. And I'm looking back to those 18 game winning runs where it just seemed impossible for a team to stop the Liverpool machine. And I'm thinking if we can get this result against Arsenal, we could go on another one of those. And if we do, then we may even end up going into January, February time once again with one hand on the trophy and one hand on title number 20. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I certainly think this is our biggest game of the season so far. We've had some massive ones already. This first run of 6 games is a really, really difficult run and potentially the most difficult we're going to have all season. We've already laid down markers, especially that one at Stamford Bridge. But I think given the current situation at Arsenal, it'll be absolutely huge to get 3 points tomorrow. And of course, it's not absolutely nailed in stone that we're going to get them, partially because of the situation with Arsenal and partially because of the situation Liverpool have got in the treatment room. Injury-wise, we have got Thiago and Alisson facing late fitness tests for this match. It wasn't really mentioned in the press conference on Friday at all, but since then we've had a couple of training sessions and we haven't really seen any of either of those players. I think Alisson has been training alone. It sounds like it's a similar situation with Thiago as well. So both of them, it's going to run right to the wire, and I don't think we'll know for sure until kick-off on Monday night whether they're going to play. Maybe we hear in the afternoon the results of the tests and stuff like that, but I think Jurgen Klopp would rather keep his cards close to his chest. I certainly think if we don't hear any news, it's probably going to be positive news. Normally we only hear an announcement if it's absolutely guaranteed that Alisson and Thiago are not going to be available. But at the moment, it's not looking great, and I certainly think in the past we've seen Jurgen Klopp play it safe. I'm looking back to the Bournemouth game right before the lockdown last season where Adrian played in goal and then of course had to play in goal in the game against Atletico Madrid in the week, and I'm thinking Alisson was kind of a doubt for that game, but he wasn't completely ruled out, and it ended up being the case that Adrian came in for both of those matches. So I think we could see something similar, and given Thiago's only just arrived arrived at the club and he hasn't necessarily had as much training time as the other players as well. He's got that whole situation where Bayern started their pre-season late, so he's had a couple less weeks to train up ready for the new season compared to the rest of the squad. I think we would be a little bit foolish to risk them, but of course it remains to be seen, and hopefully we get some sort of results from the fitness test tomorrow, and fingers crossed we do see them at least in some capacity in the game tomorrow. But apart from that, Joe Gomez is back in training, which is absolutely fantastic news. Of course, missed out the game against Chelsea last weekend and then could not play in the match either against Lincoln City, but was back in training on Friday and is looking pretty fine, to be honest. It doesn't sound like there's any real long-term issues over his fitness, and he should be available for this match. However, Jordan Henderson has pretty much been ruled out. I know that was very much touch and go. We were talking about it before the Lincoln game as well, whether or not he was going to be available for this match. It looks like he slightly missed the late fitness test, and of course, given the hectic schedule we've got coming up and the fact that he tends to play multiple games for England as well, and we've got the international break after next weekend, I think it absolutely makes sense for us to play it safe, and therefore I don't think we'll be seeing Jordan Henderson this weekend either. So, as for how I think we're actually going to line up, if I had to put money on it, I reckon it's probably going to be Adrian San Miguel between the sticks. Like I said, the situation with the Bournemouth and Atletico matches last year, I think Liverpool just don't like to risk it. And of course, we've had Adrian have a lengthy layoff last season already. The last thing we want is another one of those. I know Adrian performed admirably during that layoff and won every single Premier League game during that time, and certainly put in some decent performances. You have, of course, got his performances later on in the season, most notably the game that he, if we're honest, he kind of threw away against Atletico Madrid. He lost his head in that match, and as a result, Liverpool lost the game, which is, of course, very disappointing. But I feel like that's created this atmosphere of negativity around him ever starting a game for Liverpool. The same thing happened against Lincoln, and I know he makes a mistake against Lincoln, but that's understandable given that he basically hasn't really played any competitive football since the Atletico game. And I certainly think if he can rediscover the form from that early stage of last season, then of course he's not as good as Alisson Becker. And if Aubameyang's through on goal one-on-one, I'm not going to have the same confidence that the ball's going to be saved that I would have had if Alisson was in net. That is understandable, and that's going to happen when you have a world-class goalkeeper in your side, potentially the best in the world at the moment. If he's not playing, there is going to be a drop-off. But Adrian he's no mug. He makes good saves, even against Lincoln before he makes that error for the second goal. I thought he was having a good game. There were a couple of one-on-ones and some decent shots from Lincoln, and he made himself big, he made himself difficult to beat, and he made the saves that were necessary in those moments. So I'm not looking at Adrian starting and thinking that's a real worry and that's going to throw the game on its own, in the same way that maybe you think about, I don't want to be mean to the guy, but Kepa Arrizabalaga at Chelsea at the moment. Before when it was announced he was starting at Stamford Bridge, we were all licking our lips because we knew that he had a mistake in him, and he pretty much makes a mistake every game. There's a little bit of an atmosphere around that Adrian at the moment, so I think Arsenal fans will certainly be feeling buoyant if he starts. But for me personally, I think if he puts in the kind of performance we have seen from him in the past in a Liverpool shirt, then it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And if the defence performs well as well, then we could be looking at a clean sheet if we get a little bit lucky as well. But I think it will probably be Adrian between the sticks. Ahead of him, I think it's going to have to be Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez as the centre-half pairing. Gomez coming straight back in because, of course, with the issues with Thiago and Henderson in midfield, you want to see Fabinho back in the number 6. And then either side of Virgil and Gomez, it's almost definitely going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson. Ahead of them, I think Fabinho gets his place back in that number 6 role. It's been an interesting start to the season for him. I thought he was a little bit off it against Lincoln at centre-half. He has a fantastic game up against Timo Werner in the game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Didn't really get to show much against Leeds. You look back to the Blackpool friendly and he was a little bit off it. He gave the ball away in some silly areas. So it's a little bit difficult to judge exactly where he is form-wise at the moment, and that seems to be a huge thing for Fabinho. We've seen when he gets his form up and he gets a real run of games, he's incredible and probably the best defensive midfielder in the world. But when he has injuries that keep him out the side or he's rotated in and out, he's just not the same player. So hopefully he can start to really nail down a spot in that starting 11, because once he gets going, he's an absolute monster and he is very, very difficult for opposing teams to deal with. So I think Fabinho goes in at the number 6. I think Gini Wijnaldum has to take a place in midfield, and given the situations with Henderson and the fact we probably won't want to be too risky with Thiago, I'm going to go with Naby Keita as the midfielder. Now, if Thiago makes a brilliant turnaround and his fitness is fine tomorrow and there's no issues whatsoever, I wouldn't be surprised to see him start, certainly, because the bloke's fantastic. He's an absolutely brilliant footballer. But if there is an issue around his fitness and we want to play it safe, then Naby Keita's had a good start to the season and this changed the way he plays a little bit. He doesn't always just bomb forward. He's not so gung-ho with the ball. He's becoming more of a system player for Liverpool. So I'd be happy to see Naby Keita complete that midfield three alongside Fabinho and Gini, and I think that is how we are at least going to start the game. Of course, if Thiago is available in any capacity, I'm sure we will see him for at least some of the match. And then ahead of that midfield three, it's almost definitely going to be the boys that you all know and love, Salah, Firmino and Mane. So taking a look at Arsenal then, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, they are an utterly different prospect to what they've been in recent years. Jurgen Klopp has had some very, very high praise for Mikel Arteta. Of course, Arteta only just arrived in the management job, but it seems he's learned a lot from Pep Guardiola and has got his own style as well, which is very interesting. We sort of thought he was just going to replicate everything that's been done at Man City and Bayern Munich and Barcelona before that, but he's really got Arsenal playing in a way that has caught everyone by surprise, because it's not something that Arsenal have done for years now. Certainly in these big games, the way they can hunker down and batten down the hatches and make themselves impossible to break down, and it's understandable when you look at the players they've got, because when you've got people like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Alexandre Lacazette who can hit you on the counter, and now of course Willian as well, who was a free transfer over the summer, they are able to really hurt you on the counter attack. So I think it's going to be a very, very difficult game, and of course they've added grit to the side as well. You look back to last weekend, that game against West Ham where they get that very, very late winner. Normally, Arsenal of the past, once West Ham get that equaliser, you'd be thinking West Ham will do well to get a point and could potentially even get 3 points out of this match. Whereas now this Arsenal team is capable of really focusing on the task at hand and forcing winners and forcing their way through games. So as a result, I think unless Liverpool can somehow manage to build up like a 2 or 3 goal lead at some point in this game, then we cannot count Arsenal out at any point. And I think what's most important is that we really pile on the pressure. We be the absolute best Liverpool we can possibly be. Looking back to, I think, recent games against Spurs at Anfield, I'm thinking about the one where Kane scored early on last season and we had to turn it around from 1-0, or the season before that where they get that relatively late equaliser and we have to just pile it on them to force a late winner. I'm looking at those kind of games and thinking that is the blueprint for this, because if Arsenal are brilliant at defending, as they tend to be at the moment, and they put all those bodies back, then not only have we got to be vigilant at the back to avoid counter-attacks, but we have got to have so many chances. We've got to just keep on putting on the pressure. We saw it with, I think, Chelsea yesterday against West Brom when they get that equaliser. It wasn't necessarily through skill or through any kind of tactical brilliance. It was just through constant battering at their defence, constantly putting the ball in, causing problems, having shots, testing the goalkeeper, annoying the defenders, that kind of thing. If you just keep doing that, then eventually, if you've got enough quality on your side, and Liverpool do have that, then you should get it over the line. And I think that's what we're going to have to do tomorrow night. Like I said, I think it is going to be a fantastic game. I think it's going to be the closest Liverpool and Arsenal match at Anfield that we have seen in a very, very long time. And as I said, if we can get the win, and personally, I think we will. I don't think it'll be a battering. I think personally I can see 2-1 Liverpool, maybe 3-1 if we're at our absolute best. But if we do get that result, then that stands us in incredibly good stead going into the rest of the season to hopefully secure back-to-back Premier League titles. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's focus on the game tomorrow night. Let me know how you think it's going to go down in the comments below. Apart from that, that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy it, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there, that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel in the past. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon with yet another video. Until then, bye for now.